kind of gross, and I like it. Hollywood. This album was pretty big for me. Marilyn Manson was nebulous. He was in the ether in the late 90s. No matter what music you're into, how much you're into music, super fan, casual fan, doesn't matter. You knew who Marilyn Manson was. He was kind of this looming threat over the kids back in the day, and at a time when I was a kid. Initially with Manson, I was okay with the music, but the imagery and everything that came along with the music, it was a bit much for me when I was a young teen. Eventually I came around to the embodiment of who Marilyn Manson as an artist was. The first few albums I was aware of, I'd heard bits and bobs here and there. Hollywood was the first Manson album I bought, possibly the only one. I can't remember, honestly. I liked it immediately as soon as I heard it for the first time. I would have heard the singles, the music videos were all over MTV. You had Disposable Teens, the fight song, and the Nobodies. Both those first two I thought were really good. The Nobodies didn't grip me as much. I could see why it existed. I didn't hate it by any means, but it just didn't grip me. The Disposable Teens and Fight Song were very much what I was looking for at the time. The Nobodies, I could kind of take it or leave it. But very cool music videos. Again, on initial viewing, I was not entirely on board with the imagery, but, you know, it was an acquired taste, let's say. And eventually I very much grew to love that taste. And Hollywood was my real solid entry point for Marilyn Manson. Mechanical Animals and Antichrist Superstar, I did enjoy. And after really appreciating Hollywood, I went back to those albums and really gave them some more thought and some more, not analysis, because I wasn't really thinking about them analytically, but I did enjoy them very much. But for me, Hollywood was kind of peak Manson. And weirdly, this album didn't actually do that well. I'm sort of glossing over Wikipedia right now. And apparently it was a commercial disappointment, which is a surprise because it was kind of unavoidable. I have my suspicions. I know how the music industry works to a certain extent. I have my suspicions. This album came out in the same year and a few months after the Columbine shooting, which I'm not going to get into that whole thing. Manson was scapegoated for Columbine, which to this day is the same thing as, you know, video games cause violence. It's not. It's mental health and America's reluctance to do anything about anyone being able to get access to firearms, but let's not get into that. But so this came out that same year, and rather than shy away from the controversy, I feel that Manson very much leaned into it. It came out on a tour called Guns, God and Government. That's really leaning into what he's... It's like the fire's hot, so I've got to make the most of it now. And you know, Manson was never a stranger to controversy from day one. That's been his whole shtick, which for some people will work, and for some people it really won't work. For me, I have a bit of a liking for just being controversial for the sake of being controversial. I'm a sucker for it, okay? I love it. And Manson very much did that. After Hollywood, he kind of, in my opinion, kind of lost his way a little bit. Like a lot of the imagery for Hollywood, it was really creepy, and the sounds on the album, the atmosphere, this got a hell of a lot of atmosphere, this album, and it was really creepy and really unnerving and made your skin crawl. If you were looking for that sort of thing, like a real horror vibe, this was great. And then after this, what was the album? Golden Age of Grotesque. That was kind of brushed away for some reason. It wasn't as horror themed. It was, in my opinion, that was the beginning of his downfall. He lost his edge. The songs were still good, but in his own words, he'd kind of run out of things to say at that point, which is why you've got songs like Boom Digga Buzz Buzz Ziggity Zag, where it's just nonsense, or Kaboom Kaboom. It's just I'm run out of things to say, and here is evidence to that effect, right? It was okay, but it wasn't for me. And then the few albums after that, really not good in my opinion. But we're on Hollywood, and the trifecta of Hollywood, Mechanical Animals, and Antichrist Superstar were so good they were never going to be beaten, really. Regardless of where the music industry went, or how trends change, or whatever, they were so good, and everyone who was into Manson agreed those 3 albums were equally as strong as each other. And it was going to be very difficult to go beyond that, and Golden Age of Grotesque doesn't. This album, like I said, the imagery was really cool. It was really off-putting at first, but the inlay for the CD case, it had these tarot cards, which, as a kid, I didn't really understand what tarot was. Honestly, I don't really today. It's kind of a hocus pocus, if you ask me. But the imagery, you just open up this long piece of paper that's, folded multiple times, and you're like, that's a hideous image, that's a hideous image, that's a hideous image. And I loved just looking at it. I loved the feeling that it gave me of this kind of old, otherworldly horror movie kind of feel, and the sound of the album completely matched that imagery. Even, we'll get into it, but even just the intro of the album sounds like a horror movie starting up. It's a very long album, it's over an hour long. That wouldn't wash today at all. Is there a lot of filler? Perhaps. We'll get into it. This will be a sort of reintroduction for me. I do remember there being quite a few tracks that I would skip. They fit the album, they fit the theme of the album and the atmosphere, but are they essential listening? To my mind, probably not. The music videos, so cool. The production in the music videos were fantastic. And again, the same imagery, it was a very solid theme throughout this. The songs, the singles, the videos, the artwork, everything. Really solid concept. Disposable Teens and the fight song were blood-pumpingly exciting music videos for me back in the day. The personnel on this album is a bit of a mess. I'll put a screenshot here of everyone doing everything. But the members are Marilyn Manson, Twiggy Ramirez, John Five, Madonna Wayne Gacy, and Gingerfish. And one thing about this album that I never acknowledged back in the day, because again, I was just kind of listening to it surface level, but it's divided into 4 chapters, I guess. A, In the Shadow, D, The Androgen, A, Of Red Earth, and M, The Fallen. Looking back at it now, it's kind of pretentious. I never noticed this, and so it didn't detract from the album. And I never really thought of it as like being in different chapters. I was just track 1 and go, and really didn't think much more of it. I found this video where this guy, whose YouTube channel is called The Launch Pad, he's clearly got far more time than I do, and credit to him for putting so much analysis into this, but he goes into Hollywood and Mechanical Animals and Antichrist Superstar, and goes into super deep depth about how the 3 albums form a trilogy that's a story, only it's played in reverse. So Hollywood is the first part, Mechanical Animals is the second part, and Antichrist Superstar is the third part. I found this fascinating. I recommend wholeheartedly, if you fancy going down the Marilyn Manson rabbit hole, go and look this up after you watch this. It's so good and so in depth. I never went into such depths. I'm a big Marilyn Manson fan, but I never went into the depths of analysis that this guy has. It's crazy. Anyway, so I did really enjoy this album when I was younger. I revisit it maybe once a year, maybe twice a year or something. And again, I find myself, there's peaks and troughs in this album, hugely. The strong songs are really good, and then to my mind there's a lot of stuff that I just skip because again, it's a long album and I'd rather just get to the good stuff. Let's get into it. So as I said, the intro, GodEatGod, is a very good start to this album. It really lets you know there's going to be a lot of creepy, mysterious, kind of edgy stuff going into this album. And it really sounds like the intro to a horror movie, or a nightmare or something. Like it makes your skin crawl. There's this effect on Manson's voice that's like this buzzy digital distortion. I can't even put my finger on what exactly it is, but it really suits the creepiness of the intro. And yeah, the imagery that immediately it puts into your mind. He's talking about these dolls that I've made. That's the only thing that's smiling. It sounds like a horror movie. And this is again what I felt was, after this album, the horror, creepy, dirgy, grungy vibe was gone, and it was very much cleaned up after this. Love this intro. I will occasionally skip it if I'm being impatient, but if I'm sitting down to just listen to the album in full, then I won't skip this because it perfectly sets up what's about to come next. So when I say that this album was exactly what I was looking for at the time, the Love Song is a perfect example of that. It starts off kind of a slow tempo beat, not much to talk about, but then when the chorus kicks in, it's so slamming and so it's exciting. I really like this as a first proper track going into the album. This is an album that sort of woke me up as a young kid, in a sense. Similar to, if you go back and watch my System of a Down Toxicity video, that album really made me aware of things that were going on in the world which I'd never really considered. And Manson here is doing kind of the same thing, very much illustrating the fact that, you know, America is obsessed with God and guns and government. And again, as a young kid, I'd never really seen it that way before, and it was true then, and it's still true now. America, do something about your guns problem, for God's sake. Some people criticize Manson for just being controversial and a shock rocker and all the rest of it. But as someone who was recently scapegoated for a historical mass shooting at a high school, to make the very first song leaning into that theme of guns and all that is pretty brave. I know, you know, the 90s and early 2000s were very much a time of edginess, but this is pretty strong in terms of real world things that are going on. I think it's pretty brave of him. He could have shied away. He could have, but he didn't. And I like that about it. The fight song, I never made the connection until someone pointed it out to me, but the first few seconds of the fight song do sound a little bit like Song 2 by Blur. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Yeah, I'm going to say it right now, the fight song for me is peak Manson. It's, production-wise, it's so heavy and exciting and crisp, honestly. It sounds great, even today. And at the time, I was so ready for this song. And again, the music video would have been one of the first things that really drew me into Manson. Again, the imagery was kind of, not so sure about that, but after a while, like, this song was on rotation on MTV or whatever it was back in the day, and I was like, yeah, I'm into this. I think I need to get this album. And the production on the drums on this album is really leaning into that kind of industrial side of Manson, but not by being too overly electronic. They're not programmed drums, they're just digitally modified live drums. And it really adds a sense of chaos and fun at the same time. I'm not a religious person, so when I hear the words "I'm not a slave to a god that doesn't exist," I'm pretty on board at this point. 6 minutes into the album, I'm like, yes, that makes sense to me. I relate to that. And I was quite conflicted by the fight song because in school I did get into a lot of fights. I didn't want to. I wasn't the fighting type. I was just dragged into fights because I was a target, I guess. So I was very conflicted because I didn't... The whole fight thing, it made me uncomfortable. Because that's something that I've experienced that I don't enjoy. But at the same time, that lack of comfort is intriguing, and it makes me want more of it. The layers in Disposable Teens, you can't really put your finger on what it is. In the verses, there's this... I've been listening to this album for so many years and I still can't identify what it is. There's like I guess it's some kind of synth or some kind of keyboard or sampler or something that gives this like thick, chunky sound layered in with the drums. It just works so well. The line, "survived abortion," is so dark, man. I know this isn't like the super, it's not black metal, it's not grindcore or anything, it's very much aimed at a commercial success, but the line "survived abortion" is pretty deep. Yeah, this is a very nostalgic song for me. This was, at this point on the album, Disposable Teens, I'm like, okay, I had my doubts in the past, but now I'm 100% on board. I am a Marilyn Manson fan from here onward. Love Disposable Teens. I'm not a teenager anymore, but it still hits. I still think it's one of his best songs, possibly of all time. So this is the first kind of break on the album, which after Love Song, Fight Song, and Disposable Teens, I don't know if it works, honestly. I think that's one of my problems with this album, is the sequencing is kind of all over the place. Target audience, there's a long gap at the beginning of the song before it really gets going. And so it's a bit of a momentum killer. When it does get going, it's really good. That guitar riff, the bending on the strings, oh, it's really good, but did we need that huge break at the beginning? Yeah, the guitar melody before the chorus kicks in will forever remind me of Diablo 2, the video game. Non-gamers, you can switch off for 30 seconds, but there's something about the low-key guitar melody that it just puts the image of Diablo 2 in my head. It had similar music in the game, and I think I would have probably been playing Diablo 2 around this time. And so there's always a connection there for me between this song and Diablo. Yeah, target audience is brilliant. Should it have had such a long intro though? I don't think so. President Dead. The guitar sound on this album, now that I'm really analysing it, is so good. It's actually probably one of my favourite elements of the album, is the guitar is so, it's just right in every regard. It's not an 8-string down-tuned guitar, which, as you can tell, I'm quite a big fan of. But for a 6-string, it's so thick and it's so shiny, yet dark, and like it's cutting through the sound system. And President Dead, the guitar riff in this song gets stuck in my head. And yeah, the point at 2 minutes 20. The sort of crescendo of the song with the guitar wailing with I'm guessing a wah-wah pedal or effect or something. Oh, it's like it's launching you through the clouds. It's so good. Yeah, the sort of, I don't know if it's palm muted. I'm not a guitarist, but I do know a lot about music and instruments and stuff. But the sort of palm muted guitar in the verses, so chunky and so like meaty and with In the Shadow of the Valley of Death, we're now at the first song that I typically will skip. It's not to say that it's bad, it's not to say that I don't like it, but most of the time if I'm listening to Manson, it's because I'm here for the heavy hitters. And In the Shadow of the Valley of Death misses in that regard. It's a really morbidly pretty song. For me, it puts imagery of like a funeral or a cemetery or some church or something. It's a really pretty dark song, but I just don't need it most of the time. Again, not to say that it's bad. It just, this is the first big example of the sequencing being a bit questionable. Cruci-Fiction in Space is, to my mind, really the first one that's now leaning quite heavily into the industrial side of what Marilyn Manson does. The really tight, like electronic drum sound and the really chunky compressed guitar right at the beginning lets you know that straight away. And I love it's very easy to overlook the atmospheric sounds on this album if you're not really paying attention to it. The drums, big, loud, bombastic drums, guitar chunky and thick, the bass is nice and smooth and rich. Manson's vocals are all over the place. But there's so many little environmental soundscape noises that can easily get lost if you're not paying attention. And Cruci-Fiction in Space has that in spades. And this is the song in which, like in movies, it's like, oh, he said the thing. This song, while its atmosphere is really, really good, we are already, after the huge slab of meat that were the first 3 songs, we're really like wobbling downwards towards, like, this already kind of feels like the end of the album era. And it's not. It's like we're now about a third of the way through. Like, this song in itself has good bits in it, but there's a lot of space in between. And again, the atmosphere in it is good. It's frustrating if I'm just here for the heavy stuff, because it feels like not only are there songs that I need to skip, but there's like bits of songs that I need to skip, which obviously is a pain to do. A Place in the Dirt is another one that I would generally skip, because even when it gets going, it's kind of meandering and doesn't do very much. I'm actually already starting to get the feeling that of the albums I've covered on this channel, this is going to be ranking lower than all of them. I tend to, so far I'm trying to get this channel off the ground, so I'm reviewing big albums that a lot of people will know, and ones that I know very well but haven't necessarily listened to in some time. I don't sit there and go, I listen to this album 5 times in a row and make notes or anything. I'm doing this very off the cuff. And now that I am properly analysing this album, it's falling short of my expectations, in just that it makes this huge spectacle of the first 3 songs, and so far we're at track 9 and we haven't really seen that happen again. There's a lot of, not wasted space, but just like atmosphere and stuff, and I feel like A Place in the Dirt is not doing it any favours in that regard. The Nobodies, I don't think anyone would argue, is a classic. Again, one of the 3 singles, not, in my opinion, not as strong as the other 2, but very catchy and very morbid and very cool music video. And at the end of the album, there's an acoustic version of the Nobodies, which does it need to be there? I don't know. Sonically, this is the most different song we've heard, having purely electronic drums, at least for the verses and the intro. And when I first heard this song, I didn't like that about it, because, like I mentioned, one of the things I do like about this album is the heavy drums. I'm like, well, why are you taking that away? But I get it now that it's, it adds a bit of variety and a bit of extra flavor to the overall album. Yeah, I think the Nobodies it has its place. I wouldn't take it off the album. For the most part, I wouldn't skip it. It's full enough for me to not want to skip it, if that's even a compliment. Okay, the Death song is really good. It's the first one that reminds me of Mechanical Animals. It's a little bit more intense than Mechanical Animals got. There's a similar feel to it. I could see it being on there. And yeah, Death Song is sort of, in terms of sound, is sort of the bridging between those 2 albums. I don't know if that's intentional, I don't know if that's just me that hears that, but yeah, real nihilism in this song and album. I feel like Death Song could have been a single. It would fit with the other 3, and it would also be a nice introduction to people who are, they're going to be used to the sound of Mechanical Animals, and then have the Death Song as the introduction to the next phase of Marilyn Manson. I think that could have worked. Really good, atmospheric keyboard or, piano sampling work, whatever, like, to build the atmosphere of the song. Because you take away all the synths and all the keyboards and all the extra layers of stuff, leaving just the traditional instruments, it's going to feel like a pretty bare bones album. The keyboards and everything really fill out all the gaps, of which there are many, and are essential for the atmosphere of the album, really. Lamb of God, great band. But Lamb of God, the song, again, this is a skipper for me. I hate to say it, but it is. In my mind, this album is a lot heavier than it actually is appearing to be, now that I'm analysing it. Lamb of God just doesn't need to be on there. I understand what the song's about. I get the sentiment about the song, and it's good. It's something I can get on board with. I just don't love the song. It's kind of dull, and it's almost 5 minutes long. Oh, it doesn't need to be that long. It certainly doesn't need to be, though. This could have been like a minute long or a minute and a half long interlude or something. To stretch it out into a full song, I feel is unnecessary. Born Again, in contrast to Lamb of God, this is what I'm here for on this album. This song rips. This song is like it's taken straight off Antichrist Superstar. As soon as it starts, you're not really sure what's happening. There's this... It's like, what even is that? What am I listening to? Then the drums kick in, those really like sort of 9 Inch Nails-ish, compressed, electronic-ish sounding drums. And then the chorus kicks in. It's like, this is mosh pit music pretty much. Yeah, this is absolutely not a skipper for me. This is what I come to this album for. It's frustrating because this sound is so... In my mind, this is what the whole album kind of sounds like, but in reality, there's a lot of mellow, sort of acoustic-y songs that break the wave of intensity on the album. I just wished every song sounded like Born Again. Burning Flag, following on from Born Again. Wonderful, perfect, please give me more of this. Where is this being for most of the album? This is what I want. Yeah, these two songs, back to back, I'll say it again, this is what I'm here for. I want more of this stuff. This sort of feels like it could have been on Antichrist Superstar, or around that time. Maybe these were leftover ideas, I don't know. I love Burning Flag. Born Again, Burning Flag, what a 1-2 punch. And again, with Coma Black, we're back down to the mellow, kind of atmospheric. It's not even atmospheric. So there's Coma White and there's Coma Black. Coma White, way better song than Coma Black. And again, after the 1-2 punch of Born Again and Burning Flag, Coma Black is just like, oh, why? It's like it's edging me, this album. This song is almost 6 minutes long. I think this is the longest song on the album. In terms of storytelling and imagery and all the rest of it, it's fine. It's good. It's what it needs to be. Okay, but a 6-minute dirgy song doesn't sit well with me after Born Again and Burning Flag. It just doesn't. I said before that sequencing can make or break an album, and this album really suffers from too many disparate sonic qualities, all in an order that is. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. It's frustrating. Valentine's Day is a good mid-tempo song. Not mid-tempo, but you know what I mean, like mid energy. It's a little bit repetitive towards the middle to the end. I love the verses into the chorus. It's a really nice dynamic with a really like strained guitar. I think this is the same effect that was used on GodEatGod on the intro on Manson's voice. This kind of digital distortion thing. I can't even put my finger on what it is, but it sounds great. But this song, it kind of gets to the middle point and then it just starts meandering and repeating itself throughout the rest of the song. Annoying, because it's a good song. The Fall of Adam, again, is a song that I generally skip. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm missing the point. I mean, I get the theme of this album and the crazy storytelling and everything, like the meta of the album and all the rest of it, but in terms of song by song, enjoyment of listening experience, this is an absolute skipper for me. This will never be listened to by me in the gym, for example. At this point, we're almost done with the album. I feel like at this point, there's almost 2 albums here. There's like half the album, which is, let's say, Love Song, Fight Song, Disposable Teens, Death Song, Born Again, Burning Flag, as like the heavy part, and then there's all the rest of it. This sort of acoustic-y, atmospheric, dark, which is fine. I just don't enjoy it when they're all kind of shuffled in amongst each other. It's really annoying, and it makes a very inconsistent listening experience, which I've only really now properly acknowledging now that I'm analysing this album in the way that I am with you. I've always loved this album. I really always have. I just don't know if I've acknowledged how much of it I actually skip. But the bits that I stick around for are so good. But again, it sort of feels like it's two albums. It's like the heavy part and the melodic, atmospheric part. Maybe that would have been a better way to release it. I don't know. Fall of Adam, the one thing I will say that is good about it is right at the very end, there's this, this sound of buzzing flies and stuff, like they're floating on a corpse or something. It's kind of gross, and I like it. Like that's what I'm here for. I like the disgusting imagery and vibe and everything. And I just wish it was more accompanied by heavy, distorted guitars slamming in my face. Okay, King Kill 33 Degrees kind of feels like the stepping stone between Hollywood and Golden Age of Grotesque sonically. Like the guitars and the melody and everything is a little heavier than the majority of what was on Golden Age of Grotesque. And I do like it. It's an exciting song, which I think a lot of people, particularly these days, are never going to get round to listening because it's so late in the album. Okay, Count to 6 and Die. The last track on the album, I think, it's a very cinematic album overall, and this really puts an image in your head of what's happening while you're listening to it. It's clearly the sound of someone loading a revolver, spinning it, doing Russian roulette with themselves, essentially, and then there's only 6 bullets in the gun. It's clicked 5 times, and then it cuts before the final click. Which is really cool. It's a really good way to end this album, and I don't have anything bad to say about it as an outro. It just takes a long time, and it really feels like a long time to get to this outro. But it's very good, and we've heard all the heavy guitars and heavy drums, and so to have just one song that's basically just piano and weird atmospheric effects and Manson's voice, fine. It suits the end of the album. I don't have a problem with it. I'm going to briefly just tell a quick story about the acoustic version of the Nobodies. The first time I put this album on, going back 2001 maybe, put it on the CD player and just had it on in the background, and then after Count to 6 and Die finished, I'm like, okay, that's clearly the end of the album. And then the Nobodies Acoustic started playing, and when Manson's voice came in, it's such a well captured recording that it actually sounded like he was in the room with me, and it creeped me out. It kind of made me jump. I'm like, holy shit, has Manson just come out of my sound system into the room? I don't know if it was the acoustics of the room, or the quality of the sound system, or the quality of the recording, or all of those things combined, but it was a really surreal experience, and one I will never ever forget. But there's not really much to say about the Nobodies Acoustic. It's the Nobodies Acoustic. So my final thoughts on Hollywood are not quite what I predicted they would be. In my mind, this is a lot stronger of an album than I now think it is, because I've never sat down and analysed it in this way. I knew there was a few tracks that I tend to skip. I didn't realise there was so much of it that I would. There's, again, if you were to split this album into 2 parts, have it the heavy part and the mellow part, if you're in a mood that you want to just listen to the mellow stuff, then just listen to that. If you want the heavy stuff, then just listen to that. To have it all spliced in amongst each other, it makes the whole listening experience overall a bit of a slog and an inconsistent mess, honestly. The thing is, the heavy stuff, which I think for most people come to Manson for the heavy stuff primarily. Is it just me? The heavy stuff is so strong. Like Love Song, Fight Song, Disposable Teens. That 1, 2, 3 sequence is kind of what lets this album down, in a way. Because that's so strong, none of the rest, the closest we get to that is Born Again and Burning Flag next to each other. There's nothing bad on this album, let me be absolutely clear. I don't think any of it's bad. It's inconsistent, and it's very frustrating for me. When I reviewed Significant Other by Limp Bizkit, I gave that an 8 out of 10, because 20% of the album didn't need to be there. Aside from that, very good album, and I'm kind of feeling the same with this, only even more so. because the good stuff is so good, it absolutely elevates the album, but there's so much meandering space in between what I consider the really good stuff. I'm gonna knock it down quite a lot. And this is the problem with properly analysing albums that you've been listening to for 20 years. I mean, but it's a problem I'm finding analysing these albums after so much time, is that I'm really finding faults in them that perhaps I would have overlooked back in the day. I don't think this album is as good as I used to think it was. I'm gonna give Hollywood by Marilyn Manson a 7. Because again, it's very long, it doesn't need to be so long. There's some really strong stuff on it, but it's tarnished by the acoustic stuff and the non-like industrial heavy stuff. I'm a simple man, and I like heavy music. And there's a lot of stuff on this that really isn't heavy at all. And that would kind of become a consistent problem with Marilyn Manson's discography going forwards. But the atmosphere of the album's really good, it's really strong, the imagery and everything is very, very thematically strong. And thematically it's consistent, sonically it's a mess. It's very annoying. So it's going to be a 7. Maybe that's being harsh on it. But I don't know, I wasn't sure how much I would have to say about this album, but I didn't think I would be as critical of it as I am being. That's just the nature of deep diving on albums, I guess. That's all for now, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Maybe you feel the same way about the inconsistent mess that is this album. Maybe you think I'm an idiot and I'm completely wrong. By all means, let me know either way in the comments. But yeah, that's all. I still haven't thought of how to end videos though, so I'm just going to say, go away.